All right. Hi. This is me and Miss Shraddha, our intrepid reporter and researcher from India, in discovering the truth on the political level, the level of the world recently, and discovering, trying to cope with the reality of seeing the full rottenness of the way things have always been, but are entering a new chapter, it would appear, and all the kind of things that people don't want to hear about, but we're going to speak them anyway, if not only for our own edification and amusement and information. So yeah. So what are we like? How many months into the damn lockdown are we in India? What is it? They locked down for 2 months and then suddenly discovered that it's actually taking off now, so better lock down. And here in Australia, they're kind of like, we've only got a few cases, so they're starting to slowly open up, supposedly. And then there's the Black Lives Matter protests, and all of a sudden they're warning, there might just be a second wave. And of course, hinging everything, obviously they're going to look really bad. Their whole lockdown strategy is going to look really bad if there aren't cases after a week or two. So, maybe our cynicism will be gladly proven wrong if they don't fabricate a whole bunch of tests or a new testing regime to suddenly decide that there isn't a problem. But we've seen all the signs of media basically singing a song to creating cases that don't exist. The 30 when they needed whip up a little bit of fear, there was a 30-year-old guy who died, and then it turned out like a few days later it was all baloney, as we knew from the very beginning, because he got tested twice. This was in Australia, and suddenly there wasn't a problem at all. He hadn't died of coronavirus, but that didn't stop the headline basically, reaching its mark. And most people aren't there for the correction later on. They just get the emotional response to whatever they're fed, sadly. So that's where we're at, the second wave, which mysteriously everybody just knows is going to happen. So I suppose in the whole process, we've become sensitized in a way that puts you in a position that people don't really want to be in, because it's an uncomfortable position of feeling like you're cynical, that you can read the news, that you can read the way things are concocted and sold to everybody, and you're not in that infantile state of just believing everything that's fed to you. But the sad thing is, the appearance was that there were a lot of holes in the argument a month ago, and basically the whole narrative hasn't really changed fundamentally. So for me, it's been about adapting to that reality, that there was an early fight on to wake people up to what might be happening, and yet the same game is going on, and now these political battle lines are just being drawn, and people are just deciding, I'm on that side or I'm on that side, and most of them are still on the side of believing whatever they're told. So it's sad, but frankly predictable from my perspective. So for me, I've been spending less time concerning myself with such theories and more time surrendering to the reality of things, because that produces such a feeling in myself that I need to personally adapt to just accepting a new chapter in coping with being on a planet of basically zombie-like humans who really accept the matrix lock, stock and barrel, and don't understand their responsibility for allowing it to continue, and allowing the powers that be to manipulate them and use them completely, and everyone else along with themselves. So yeah, we have to cope with that reality, and it's okay. On a wider level, that's okay. Extraordinarily challenging. That's where I'm coming from. What about you, Miss Shraddha?
Yeah, I'm just frustrated finally after weeks, maybe a couple of months or more now of just going through stuff like oceans of information, it seems to me, for the first time in my life, with such zeal, looking into politics, looking into pharmaceuticals, looking into industries, history of native people in American politics, Indian politics, and funnily enough, everything, everywhere you look, there is something there that it connects back to the situation happening right now, and how the forces operate, and why, and it actually gives you understanding, clarity. And when you see like youngsters nowadays, okay, I call them youngsters because I am 46 years old, and I mean, I look at them and I'm like, wow, this is literally, and people are taking stands against this and that and making noises, and they're saying it seems literally blind leading the blind. That's the classic example of blind leading the blind going on right now, at least in Indian politics.
No,
And they accuse each other. Yeah.
Mm.
Accuse each other of not knowing the history, but actually they just know the history that's being fed to them. Nobody ever makes a sincere effort. Well, I say nobody, but most 99% probably of people don't really actually make an effort to uh, find out history, like go on researching. And if you just rely on textbooks or the current newspaper of now, whatever last few couple of decades, you're not going to know the truth.
Right.
I mean, and
And
anyone coming.
it's devolved into a kind of a nasty fight now, which is interesting. At first, I thought it was very promising that a lot of people, at least, were entering into some kind of discussion because this whole thing was impacting them so strongly. I think, from my perspective, we again saw like the people would pop their head out for a second, and then so very easily revert to taking one stance or believing. I mean, the challenge is that so much of the information is so contradictory. It's so frustrating. It's an uncomfortable place to go to, and people, we've seen that as you say, when you look at multiple situations, you see repetitions of similar behavior. That people will, they might flirt with an idea, but their desire to identify as one thing or another, either politically or all the choices in their life to have been a yes man for this and not supposed to have questioned that and so forth, means that in the end they just revert to these stances in spite of the fact that there's quite clearly evidence on both sides for some things, and one side is being censored, basically literally pushed, and the majority of the people are fighting for that. They're fighting to back up actual censorship. It's just like in the Matrix with the whole thing. Like, so many people are inured to the system that they will literally fight for what oppresses them. It's what is it called?
And it's what there is this Indian YouTube guy makes YouTubes in Hindi about current topics, and he just compared a lot of stuff with how things were back in Hitler's time in Germany. The censorship, the the virtue signaling, and so on. How it was perceived so innocent in the beginning, and just complying with the laws and the kind of things that were legal. And it's like, it's startling how many parallels you can draw, actually.
Yeah, and that's been growing. Those parallels have been drawable for a long, long time, and it's incredible because it's the classic thing of people don't heed history, then they're bound to repeat it. And yet, I don't know a single person who hasn't seen like a ton of movies saying like, how did those people fall for that? How did they kind of like go along with stuffing Jews in a gas chamber? Well, it's because they didn't see themselves. They weren't capable or willing of seeing what they were doing, and it is exactly the same phenomenon now.
Yeah, it's frustrating. It is so frustrating.
It's
that they get. I mean, I send something to my friend, and they say like, "Do you want to be part of this? We're discussing this." He said, "No, I'd rather play Ludo in my free time." I'm like, I feel like saying, I just hope you have free time left later on to do anything in your life, because you don't seem to understand that there is something at stake here.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people who just laugh, and no matter what you say, they just decided, they're going to just laugh at you. They just keep leaving laughing emojis on every
that special breed of Facebook person who goes around putting laugh emojis on
Yes.
serious things. I
Anything
mean, those
serious, yeah.
people, if you want to count, if you want a contender for the first people who should be up against the wall, it's them, not the people they're laughing at.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I started feeling today. I was like,
And yet it's around the other way. They're exactly the people who will survive because they will always go along. Now, on another spiritual level, you would say, well, that, you know, if you were excessively generous, you would say that they're surrendering to the situation, but they're not. Surrendering is like you're conscious of a situation and you accept it. When you're actually literally willfully living in a fantasy situation that doesn't take on board the actual information or the reality that
right.
exists,
I don't
and
think,
that's not
yeah, I
surrender.
don't think they,
That's delusion. That's literally coming to this planet and literally having no idea what's going on from the day and being completely okay with it from the day you're born till the day you die.
not only that, I think they're actually they have been brainwashed so strongly, they can't even see. And they're like yesterday, I put this comment on this medical doctor's page about the autopsies that happened in Germany. Like this one doctor in Hamburg, I told you, I think went against WHO directives and performed autopsies on COVID patient dead bodies. And so there was an article about that in Germany and their findings, and that they were all the patients who had died, they actually were in such a bad condition physically from pre-existing, you know, comorbidities or whatever you call them, and that they would have not made it till the end of this year anyways.
Right. Right,
So
the fantasy that our world has not produced a hell of a lot of extremely unhealthy people I mean, the whole thing is ridiculous. It's literally, I've said to you before, it's like there were a bunch of war movies on a couple of weeks ago, and you see, like, there's at certain times in history, people have just suddenly come to accept that for whatever reason, they probably didn't even understand the politics. They just went around killing each other en masse. You know, it's like you've got to come to the in-your-face reality that the entire human species sometimes is not only wrong about a whole bunch of stuff and has been repeatedly throughout history, but sometimes it goes manifestly insane. Just everyone just goes hysterically
right,
insane
right.
and believes a huge bunch of bullshit, whether or not it's created or conspiratorial or not. It's just plain insane. And that's what's happening now. It's like, okay, a small amount of people are dying, but I mean, they're literally destroying the economy, and that's just not just money, but they're destroying all the wrong people. And when you see, like, the reflection of this scenario for the powers that be on every level, I mean, it literally ushers in their entire agenda. I mean, just when you see how tailor-made the whole thing is, you've got to have some suspicion. If you have any knowledge of how the world, the markets, history, politics has worked during your lifetime, you've got to have some suspicion. And yet you have 90% people having no suspicion, trusting everything that's on the news, and the other 5% who are questioning it,
Oh
reverting,
yeah,
basically just arguing against these crazy conspiratorial anti-vaxxer 5G people. Oh my God, that they've just the dominant paradigm narrative has just literally resorted to
and not only that,
outright
they go.
derision of the people who actually hold the truth. It's everything has always been upside down on this planet, but it is literally to a comic, tragic degree at this point. And to live with that is an extraordinary burden when, you know, the people who live with it have to take on even more because of the outright denial of the 95, 90 whatever percent. They're literally shoving their denial and all the pressure of all the energy of denial of reality on those who are willing to see it. And on top of that, heaping their derision. It's an extraordinary moment in history to be aware. It is, even on just on that level. But then if you add the spiritual level too, it is double, triple. It probably could not be much more extraordinary. Well, they're going to try and make it even more extraordinary, or God is, or reality is, or whatever. But it's truly extraordinary.
Yeah, I can't even believe that this is actually, you know, you have to laugh at it sometimes because I just get so tense listening to the kind of stuff that's coming to my attention. But also I was just yeah, even like people not even just going crazy about this conspiracy so-called theorist, but they even go and question, like in my country people get mad at the opposition also for asking holding the government accountable, asking them questions. They say all you do is ask questions, what have you done for the country? This is becoming their of all the devoted pro government people, this is becoming a thing. And they don't even
needing
understand that that's the job of the opposition. You dumbass, you have to hold them accountable, ask them questions. That's how democracy works. Nobody even understands, and they're going on, you're always asking questions, you don't really provide any solution. What is wrong with, they're all completely brainwashed, and they're constantly attacking anyone who says anything otherwise. It's unbelievable.
It's an emotional need for belief in something outside themselves, and you have to have been conditioned into that level of subservience, and they're not aware of themselves. And to me, the root of it is the fact that people don't have actual real spiritual paths, because the beauty of spiritual path is that it makes you constantly sit back and look at what's going on. I've been finding a need for that, which has been welcome in many ways, but like I do Vipassana, and it's like I ask myself again and again when I'm at threat of sitting in judgment of other people en masse, am I deluding myself? And can I explain a mindset that I can't imagine being like that, because it's been so long that I've practiced these things and been, not been willing to not receive the rewards that they receive for selling out. I mean, it's pure matrix. But I mean, for me, it's like every time you sit down and you examine the energy in yourself, you have to be honest with yourself. And if you don't ever do that, then it's like possession. It's what is happening with the rich and the government. This energy just continues on as a train, and it goes down whatever path works for you as an individual, because you're so caught up in your ego. So these people, they play these games that are so destructive because they never look at themselves, never go back to the source, never question who they are or what they're about. And I've had people say, "Oh, you're spiritual," as if we shouldn't. Nobody knows what that means. Well, spiritual is just being aware of what this is, and that's why the political is an actual, real, concrete manifestation at some point, because what we're being challenged to see is, what is this? It's the same question. What is this? Who am I? What is this? And grappling with that, even if there's no absolute certainty about it, there is there's a more or less deep interaction with that question that reveals the truth. And yet it is extraordinary how few people, sadly, on this planet who make any real attempt
oh my God, yeah.
to do that.
I'm amazed because my spiritual friends also kind of try to, in the name of being, like being careful and being I don't know, but they, whatever you may call them, being not wanting to get involved in the world and etc. They keep warning me that what are you giving attention to? What are you spending time? Why are you doing this?
Right.
And I feel like I'm not asking you to do the same, although I feel that why aren't you doing this?
Right.
But
it's a very difficult balance. I mean, it's hard enough for people to go even to that other side from their constructed personal lives, and just the hope that everything's going to be all right, and daddy government's going to take care of everything. And it's always been nice to me, even though all the evidence is there.
And the intelligent people, the educated, intelligent, maybe more free-thinking people who are not spiritual, they don't have time to think about these things. They're just made super busy right now. Well, thankfully,
that's either because they want something, or they've been conditioned to want something, or they've been made poor and they have no choice. Either way, it all fits perfectly into the agenda of what's unfolded for people, is to destroy the middle class, to make people desperate for money, to therefore not question, to dumb them down in general, to get them to rely upon simple things like patriotism and let's just support the guys in power and all this kind of thing. It all fits in very clearly and very neatly to what's going on. but the thing about the spiritual thing is like it's that's what's tricky, and that's what I've always, you know, in my thing is about paradox. It is extremely tricky at that point because it is utterly paradoxical to be in complete acceptance of what is, and on the other hand to have a divine sense of the way things should be. And in many ways, the average person doesn't even deal with either of those. They just go along with whatever. It's a kind of a half surrender and a kind of a vague sense of, you know, but it's not a clear sense of the way things should be, which is the traditional sense of spirituality. You know, a good world, a world where people are true and just, is a kind of a leftist political stance, in my understanding. And yet here I have all these people who back up all these right-wing guys, not even understanding the fundamental philosophy that you are going to get without exception from the right wing, which is basically, you know, life is about money and who wins, and the big successful billionaires drag us through, and we say thank you and we accept the scraps, and if you can't even work for them, then you can go off and die. That's fundamental right-wing philosophy, and yet you've had all these people suddenly go, oh, I like the narrative of the conspiratorial stuff, and then about the coronavirus, and now so they're getting that from the Q side, from this alt-right, and that's a big discussion. We've kind of had that before. We could go into it, but I mean, it's they're jumping to that other side, not realizing that that it's a very difficult issue now, because most people are leftist at heart, and yet the world, in a similar way, has suffered hugely from the fact that people don't understand even their own values and how they align with the parties that they end up voting for. So they vote in people who are they vote against their own interests. I mean, we have so little power to start with, and then to surrender it to voting for someone who doesn't even represent what you're about is just it's just a moment of complete insanity, which is utterly typical. You've got greater than 50% of the population voting for the 1%. I mean, and you can't even tell people that, but that's the simple fact and reality. And it just goes on and on and on.
How do you counter that, the current narrative that the leftists are the problem right now? Because it's in so many, not just America, even in India, people are being called leftist in a, like if you're a leftist, then you're a terrorist kind of a way. You know?
It's a very dangerous moment for that exact reason. I mean, it is interesting, and I haven't looked, that so much of the anti-lockdown stuff is coming from this alt-right, and I grant that there's a lot of there seems to be a lot of interesting material which is being suppressed. But you know, I know from years and years of watching the right that they are masters of deception, and they will literally put on the best. It's pure double agent spy movie thing, in my understanding. I've seen hippies suddenly become like Trump supporters, and they do not realize that the one talent of the right, and I see it every single day in Australian politics, is just to lie, deceive, lie, and cover up that philosophy that I just mentioned, that their fundamental philosophy is not democratic. It does not care about the people. And people go into this confirmation bias, this cognitive dissonance, and they just, like in America and Australia, and all these right-wing populists have just been committing crime after insult to democracy, day in, day out, constantly for decades. And yet people that just become so inured to it, so numbed by it, they don't even realize that the obscuration is supposed to numb you, and yet they agree to be numbed rather than come to understanding about what's going on. There is an intentional process of obfuscation. There's an intentional process of the right wing trying to appear like nice guys occasionally, to sell that, and then basically go back to their agenda. And people find any reason to shore up the beliefs and the actions that they've already made. And it's just extraordinary to me that people are so easily deceived en masse. Like the majority is literally easily hoodwinked. And so you've got this idea that, you know, that whole thing of that, you know, this is caused by the left is utter nonsense, absolute utter nonsense. And the
Yeah,
Bill
in
Gates
India,
is some kind of lefty or
unfortunately,
something, just because he's using globalism, which on the face of it is a leftist idea. You know, if that's the case, then the United Nations and the League of Nations were just doomed from the beginning. They were well-meaning concepts. Most people would believe that, certainly in history, that we wanted to basically stop wars, right? So globalism per se wasn't always destined to be uh, uh, um, sabotaged by evil. But that's, if you make that assumption, then that appears to be now what's happening, and that's what we're afraid of. But is that left? No, that's not left. That's a right-wing tycoon of another stripe, basically. You've got a little game amongst right-wing tycoons, basically. Anybody who wants to make a shit ton of money and kill people is not a true leftist. A true leftist is a person of compassion who cares about other humans and creates a safety net. And
so what
so it
they're
all
just calling
the
liberals.
whole vocabulary has been distorted intentionally, so nobody knows what the crap is going on. That's basically the
Exactly.
job, and it's been the way they've done things for a long time. And to me, that's having seen that, that's the default perspective in which I view these Q wars and all, who's telling the truth about all this stuff. And unfortunately, even on that level, the few people who are awake to that, I'd see them misinterpreting it, in my view. And it's a very dangerous thing, because in the end, it's going to be a vote for a Trump and another populist. And their agenda and the way they've taken the world is clear, and they're like within a hair of checkmate. So, it's to me, it's like they're just basically saying, let's invent a new way to mess with people, and then laugh at them, and then prove that they don't deserve autonomy, that we deserve to control them and steal off them, and choose whether they live or die. And that's the point we're coming to. And people aren't even taking, majority of people aren't even taking it seriously, which is incredible. It's just
So
an
it's
incredible
just,
thing to come to this planet, basically.
it's confusing. It's very confusing. Like you're right. What they've done is just like completely damaged all any kind of trust in any system, because they keep changing this. Use these labels interchangeably whenever it suits them, or what it seems like. Calling them liberals and leftist and whatever. Same in India also. I can't make sense of it, because on one end their narratives keep changing. Like Donald Trump, for example, in America, at one point he's talking about, yeah, we have to invest in vaccine, and then he goes and defends WHO, and he calls about to arrest Gates and all that. So I don't understand then what is he talking about? Like, is he that's what Gates wants to do. He's talking to all like there were all country nations. Like last week there was this Gavi um, Global Alliance for Vaccines initiative or something. Their world global forum, and all the countries leaders, whoever was representing, they actually pledged in total billions of dollars to Gavi for vaccine development and all that. So, and if we believe that he has this evil agenda, uh, then you might want to trust Trump, because he doesn't want to support Gates, but then he still talks about vaccines. And then he talks about other medicines, but he just sort of kind of hints at them and then plays, with people's minds with that. And
But,
it seems like, yeah,
but look at it. The net result is that everybody checks out. It's like the war of the demigods in the Buddhist cosmology. As long as these guys are fighting and obscuring what the issues are, everybody just ends
right.
up going, we're just all bamboozled, basically. And the media is paid, all these paid whores and all the experts that they choose to be experts, not your experts, our experts.
Hmm.
um, as long as they just keep repeating themselves, like Goebbels said, if you repeat a lie long enough, then it becomes the truth. And
Yeah, no,
that's
media is
the end
definitely
game.
good.
So their left-right thing is just an obfuscation of the idea that you have any values whatsoever. They're just screwing people.
Indian media is amazing. Still, even this morning, I saw my mother watching on her phone news channels, and they're still talking, claiming dead, mortality rates from COVID-19 in lakhs in all the countries, 2 lakhs in Spain, and this how many lakhs here, and how many are dying. Who knows who's going to go and check? They're just constantly terrorizing people.
They
And
haven't.
why would they do
They
it?
have not shut up about this. I mean, even from the very beginning, it was absolute blanket coverage. And when even when all the holes were begun to shot into it, it has not reached mainstream media. Any of that stuff.
Wow.
The serological studies that showed that it was 50 times less deadly, et cetera, et cetera. It's just had no impact, and it's been tragicomic to watch. It really has been, having put in so much effort to basically get this information out there, and yet you've still got actually quite a large proportion of people on social media believing all this stuff, and all the mainstream media in its wisdom has done is just deride them. And there's been a pattern with that too, because it's like say the 5G or the vaccination issue. There are thousands of studies and information, and then they'll just say there's none. It's wrong. It's discredited, and that's the whole story. And that's like white privilege. It's like, well, because we have the dominant paradigm, we don't have to offer anything. We'll just guide you. And the vast majority of people go, oh, well, that makes me feel good. And now I can take a position, and it's the same position I had. So it's very easy to go to that and not recognize your weakness, that you're literally unable to absorb new information and make a decision for yourself and do anything important at an important moment of history. It's just all comes down to human weakness being utterly, people weaponizing human weakness, basically, and the fact that people literally do not want the truth. And Hitler Germany, it's a pure repeat of the same willful denial that's been going on forever in humans. And if humans refuse to wake up, then we just have to accept we came to a planet, and that's where I'm left. It's like we have to be surrendered. It's going to be nasty. It's really sad to watch this. I've been watching for years as humanity has become fallen, basically. I'm surrounded by fucking idiots, basically. We're going to have to live through that. It's very sad. Nobody wants to hear that fact, but it's requiring an extraordinary level of awareness from ourselves to live in such an environment.
I finally, I was feeling today and yesterday that we just have to give up, but we unfortunately give up on some people, and you almost want some of them to actually really face the music of this because of turning blind eye, as a result of their inaction. But then who knows how it's going to unfold, though. We don't know who's going to suffer, who's in action actually.
Well, that's where on the ultimate level surrender is the most important thing. But I mean, on a slightly lower level, there is such a thing as karma. If you're on that human level to any degree, which we all are, well, I think we're on both levels. We have to accept the way things are, but we also, it's completely human to go, well, you're not facing up. The result of your inaction is that this is continuing. And we are having to deal with having to reach you and be denigrated for attempting to reach you. There's a payment. If you believe the Buddha in any sense, there is ultimately, if there is such a thing as individuals, there is a karmic payment. And, in spiritual terms, there's always been these theories of, liberation is a state or such and so forth. Well, I've often been reflecting lately, liberation is the willingness to see the truth in some ways. When people say wake up, I used to think, well, that's not a very deep form of waking up. It's just waking up to information. But there is a truth to that. It's not just the information and getting the right information. It's like, am I willing to see the truth? I mean, it runs through on every level. It's like, can I look at this? And you've got a situation, the vast majority simply do not want to look. They will not feel what's in their body. They will not hear the truth. They will accept only what's given to them. They will take the path of least resistance, which is whatever is most comfortable for them, whatever gives them the rewards. They won't see that the world is upside down, that it gives all its rewards, all its 30 pieces of silver to all the Judases and all the sellouts and all the fakes. That is what it is on human. That's what it's like in samsara in Buddhist terms. and it's very it's just being willing to face reality is like, I believe that does confer liberation, because if you can see the truth, you go to a true place, so to speak. If you think of it in terms of reincarnationally, which again is the Buddhist concept. It doesn't have to be literal, but it's like, if you imagine, I had a vision a long time ago, like you came of like when you come down the wormhole into this earth, and then at one point you leave it, and suddenly going, wow, you suddenly die and you wake up and you go, oh, that was what was going on. Or they put you in front of the council at the pearly gates and say, did you realize that that where you were, did you have any idea what was going on and what you were part of? And you go, no, I just didn't, no, whatever. I didn't care, really. I just kind of did what I was told to do. Well, there are ramifications potentially to that. So, there is some reason for accepting, again, in Tibetan terms, it's classic, or Jesus on the cross. You take on the burden of seeing the truth. It is a burden. It's hard, which is why people don't want to do it. It's hard to see the truth in a place like this. But why else would you be here? People say, like, why did I come here to, if I didn't want to suck the marrow out of life, or form a business, or do this, do that, jump out of a plane, or, well, how about just you came to see what was actually going on here, and face up to it, and not just take everything for yourself and run. Not take the scraps off the table of the big guy and support him in continuing massive suffering, or on the other level, some come to a deep acceptance for now that that's the way it is. I mean, these are enormous challenges, but to me, this whole situation is hugely highlighted and made more poignant, both those sides of the spiritual. So, on a human level, it's never been harder. On a spiritual level, it's extremely confronting. So, we make noise, we make posts and so forth. We try to reach people. We can't accept whether they're going to listen. And the vast majority do not. They absolutely do not. Of course, even then, it's like I've noticed, you could play the game and turn your attempt to be some kind of influencer into some kind of business and go and farm for likes and pay for this and pay for that. But to me, that's dishonest. And so, I reach so few people that I notice even the ones that I do reach, they when they do press like or this kind of thing, they still don't get me on their feed. So I'm very suspicious that those of us, it fits in with the program that they don't want anybody, they don't want to sponsor certain people. The algorithm isn't just simple. Like everything else, there's a lot of underhanded stuff going on. They want us to feel like we're speaking to the wind.
Oh, yeah, constantly. Yeah, we get a lot of indications along the way that might be happening. Yeah. I've seen a few times. So if I've been going backwards and forwards about on a post about vaccines, then after 3 comments, my comment doesn't go through. And it said, oh, we will try again. And then I suddenly had a moment that I removed the word vaccine from that, and immediately it went through.
Right.
Everything else was the same.
Not relevant. I mean, the power, that's the power of AI in these bots. They can basically decide that your comments are not, we don't want them being circulated. Because, I mean, the amount of times that I've sat there with one of my 700 friends, like, a handful of seeing it, and even a handful are giving a shit. So, all the power of social media should be, without that algorithm, to go through the 6 state, what is it, the 6 degrees of separation, that we could reach the planet. That's the power of social media. If we had a society that wasn't all about making the big companies bigger and richer and reinforcing the dominant paradigm, then, it would be the most powerful, like Bitcoin. It has all the power to create, to undo all the wrong controllers. Social media, Bitcoin, 2 classic examples of where we get the technology and it's used against us. Psychology.
I think it's
technology used against us. Nuclear power, They get all the scientists to discover all the knowledge of the world used against us. That's the pattern.
Well, I mean, I can't say that it's completely working for them, because if it wasn't for internet and Facebook, I wouldn't have known anything. 5% of what I know right now. I don't think it was possible. It's just
Sure.
purely made possible because of the ease of access of
Yeah.
information here.
You're just going to have to cope with my ultimate cynicism that, you know, it's edifying for us to know, but it's also a great burden for us to wish to tell and not be able to tell, and have to deal with a sense that, you know, that may not even be realistic, that nobody's interested. Maybe people are interested, but it's not even getting to them, you know. And the psychology of even people who I know follow my stuff, and yet they'll never press like, you know, because they're afraid. I mean,
Yeah, it
that's the
crossed my
burden.
mind several times when I
That's
put
just on the
like
cross.
something.
That's the burden. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, when I go ahead and put a like on some extreme sounding post, then later on I do feel a little paranoid that if that is, because it does reflect in you. So you just have to click on a person's name, and Facebook shows you their last interactions with whatever, everyone, any particular group, what they visited, what they liked, where they commented. Facebook shows you everything.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just strange.
So
It's gone
that,
that way. We've been naive about the fact that, you know, our you know, we don't want to think these things, but this is a spy machine, just like Snowden said, and Facebook is a disempowerment machine as much as it is an empowerment machine. You know, everybody has a voice, but nobody's listening. Um, and all the day we're telling them everything about ourselves.
yeah.
You know, it's not like that getting off it is an answer necessarily, but
I don't know. I don't think so. But we have to be selective. Like I just have been lazy. But I often thought about removing. It's too late now, but I still feel like I could take down all my personal pictures from Facebook, because why leave them on when you know so much about how it works? You know, any stranger could come and, or a friend of a friend can come and have a look at your stuff, and then you can use it. There's just so much going on about all these fake porn videos. I just saw a video of something called, they just take your face, and there is this, you know, technology that can put your face on to anything, and then so many women are finding themselves in porn videos. They have no idea. And yeah, like housewives or whoever, biggest celebrities are finding themselves, they're there, and the list was showing all the famous names, you know. I mean, how can it be possible? But it's there. So,
right, and we don't get to know the truth anymore. So, which is again is a huge challenge to adapt to, but on the face of it, concerning. Yeah. Well, I
I
mean,
think
yeah,
that
the cat is out of the bag, you know. I mean, even like in the end, we're seeing now with so many people fighting over the result. Like, what would happen if we dethrone these guys? I mean, it's really, you've got to remove evil from. You've got to people. There is no solution until people become good again. In a way, it's almost like Kali Yuga. It's like if even the people who replaced these guys had the same fundamental mentality, if we're not even arguing about what goodness is, about what truth is, if there's no sense of that even existing anymore, then what's the
right.
outcome going to be? You know, it's just like, oh, did that happen, or is it Bill Gates the bad guy, or is Trump the bad guy? Well, if they're both
We can't do,
self-serving,
that's
if
the
you've got
whole.
a self-serving system that basically brings self-serving people to to it, then it's not like this cabal is just going to fall and all of a sudden we're going to go back into a golden age of people being nice and so forth. And
Good people aren't even there. They're not even playing. I think that's the biggest problem. That's the main problem right now. They've just somehow managed to take over everything, everywhere, infiltrated. You know, in India, NGOs, all the whatever you call, name it. You know, child health organizations or this and that. To me, I can now see it how systematically it has been. The whole everywhere, all systems have been infiltrated.
mm-hmm. Yeah, but you can see that that's guaranteed. If you dumb the people down, if you make them poor enough, if you have them basically, when it all comes down to it, say, this is about me and my survival, which is essentially, people don't understand, that's a spiritual thing. It's between me as ego or me as everything. If I don't give a shit about the everything, if I am fundamentally about my ego, then there will always be another ego to take the place of the last guy. All you got to do is offer him a bit more money, make him the guy, make him the pop star, make him the head of the organization, and then the next person is in on a different pecking order. I mean, Ike and those guys are absolutely right. It is a pyramid structure, and at the bottom of it is lack of human integrity, and the fact that people have been so easily duped. They've been so easily bought over, and they don't even believe in morality, goodness, and the spiritual principles. You know, even this whole war on the very idea of religion and spirituality, as if, you know, it's for crazy people, or it was all just about, you know, Catholic priests buggering little boys and all this kind of stuff, is all a narrative just to basically say all that stuff about morality. You know, and all the movies that we absorb about, you know, the bad guy. It used to be crime didn't pay, now crime does pay. There was a flip. I mean, it's been social engineering all along, and people just don't want to see that every piece of information has been about programming them. If they cannot step back from themselves, if they don't practice stepping out of the illusion, stepping out of the matrix constantly, if they're told that a spiritual path is some kind of boutique thing that they don't have time for, then they will be dumbed down. And this will be the result.
Just that, but I don't think it's even that simple. Like, even spiritual so-called leaders,
yeah, but they're leaders,
have been affected by.
Well, that's the thing. Spirituality, that's the difficulty. That's why, you know, like in the Bible, it says the way is narrow. You can say like educated people and spiritual leaders, there is no guarantee that those people have any integrity whatsoever. And furthermore, because even spirituality itself is very narrow, it's very easy to go wrong with it. It's very easy to sign back in, log back into your ego. You know, everybody knows that. We all do that to a degree, but it's just a matter of degree. A lot of those guys just sell out and they become leaders or whatever. Or, you know, I don't know. I don't know if you went. I wanted to see Chomsky's Manufacturing Consent. He's literally analyzing the fact that all these educated people, the top 5%, are literally, the university is it's a leader producing machine to reinforce the dominant paradigm. I mean, he over and over again points out how the mainstream media has literally just barked the tune of what the leaders want over and over and over again in history. It analyzes it perfectly. And yet here we are right now, this day, where people who come up and say, well, the mainstream media, because Trump said it, now it's some right-wing thing, but it's not. Mainstream media, even for the left, is doing exactly the same thing. These apparently quite smart people, and there are a lot of people who are apparently smart. All you got to do is pay them to say what you want to say, and they will do it. You don't even have to put a nail on their neck. It's quite simple to get people to go, well, you know what, this is the deal. I say this, and this is our agenda, and blah blah. You know,
That's why it's confusing for me. But no, sorry, carry on. Yeah.
Well, that's it. The mainstream media, you know, we're crazy for saying such a crazy thing. I mean, right now the news is on in the next room, and I know that they're just. I've never seen more clearly, more obviously that it is a propaganda machine, and that they're saying that all the anti-vaxxers, they have propaganda. The main propaganda comes from the dominant paradigm. That's how they get to the dominant paradigm.
Right. This is what I really want to talk about this, because when I say confusing, of course, now I know very clearly. I've known it for a couple of decades that whatever comes in the news is not worthy of attention, actually. But right now, what's going on is just so obvious that it's insane. You have to be blind, deaf, dumb, and stupid to not realize what's going on, or completely immersed in that world and not have a clue of anything else, right? But what I'm saying is, see, for example, what happened in America about the first was coronavirus thing, going crazy, and then the whole thing suddenly turned into Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
Right. Now the whole media is going.
I know. We went out on an anti-vax protest uh, and there were 500 people, and then the next week something happens in America and 50,000, like 100 times more people turn out to a race relations. It reminds me exactly of 4 or 5 years ago when our right-wing government was screwing us left, right, and center, day in, day out, basically dismantling the entire society, and everybody was all crazy about gay marriage. It's like they got to basically funnel and channel their energy and their concerns into something simplistic,
Hang on.
rather than the real issue of what's going on.
I'm not clear what you just said. You said the 50,000 were in America or in Australia?
No, in Australia, because I mean, it is an issue. Of course, it is an issue. There was a genocide here, and the Australian Aborigines were fucked over. But that's been alive for the last 100 years. Is anybody asking themselves why, after 2 months locked inside the house, there's all this pent-up energy about what the fuck is going on, and suddenly race relations is the big issue? Meanwhile, the entire world is falling apart and everybody's under martial law. I mean, it is infantile to think that the big issue is race relations at this moment. It is not the big issue.
Okay,
the entire
exactly.
planet is being taken over and we're being enslaved. And
exactly. My point exactly.
That tells you right there that 99% of people are completely diverted as to what is actually going the hell on.
Right. Hold on.
They're even the ones who give a fuck. That's 99% of the people who give a fuck about anything. And they're only 1% of the people who actually, that 50,000 is still a minuscule proportion of 25 million in Australia. So you're down to 99.99% of people literally living in a fucking fantasy.
But you know what, the mind fuck is going on because the people are using Martin Luther King saying that injustice anywhere is a threat to injustice everywhere, or justice everywhere. And then things like that come out, and obviously your emotions are played with. If you stand for something, then now is your time to stand for this. It's very confusing to what do you pay attention to?